Hey, what's up? I'm Allie, and welcome back to my channel. Today, I'm basically going to be doing the rest of my July wrap-up. I think for the rest of the year, I'm probably just going to do monthly wrap-ups again. The recent reads just is a little all over the place for me currently because I am actually reading now. It was fine before when I wasn't reading anything, but now that I am reading, it's a little hard to keep track of. So I do think for the rest of the year, I'm probably just going to do go back to monthly wrap-ups, and y'all probably don't care either way. I do have 6 things that I finished reading in July. I'm only going to talk about 5 since one of them is for a video that is nowhere close to being done. So let's go ahead. Let's get into that. The first one that I'm going to talk about is a graphic novel called When I Arrived at the Castle. And this is stunning. It is black and white and red, and that is it. And it is basically about a monster hunter who shows up at this vampire-ish castle and is there to kill her. But there's a lot more to that. There's a lot more to it than that. And one of my friends had told me this is kind of erotic. There is nudity, so there is some of that as well. It's kind of like what happens when you show up at the castle and the monster wants to play with you. I took it a few different ways as well. I think you could reread this and find a different way of taking the story every time because it's vague enough and there's little snippets enough that you get some understanding, and it feels like a kind of an old school dark fairy tale. I don't know, there was times where I had to reread things because I was a little confused, but I did really enjoy the story. I do wish that this was maybe just a little bit longer because it is very short, and I would like to own a copy, but it's pretty expensive, I feel like, for how short it is. And so I would have loved to have seen this just be a little bit longer. So I did give this 4 stars, but I do think if you can get your hands on this and it sounds like something you're interested in, I think this will be a really good kind of spooky read for readathons because it is so short. But there's a lot of depth to it for being so short. I will say that. Like, the brevity does not take away from the overall value of the story. It doesn't change the fact that I wish it was longer, but it doesn't take away from it. Then we have The Maidens, and I actually do have a vlog coming out. I think everyone probably will already know how I feel about this because everyone seems to feel the same way about this, and that this book was just extremely underwhelming. This is kind of pinned as a dark academia type story, and honestly, I don't know if I would put it in that camp. It is about a woman who, her niece calls her from university and says that her friend has been murdered, and so she shows up and is kind of like investigating into this herself and finds out that there is this group on campus called the Maidens who kind of follow this teacher around, and she's pretty sure this teacher is the killer, but she just has to like figure out how to prove it. Like, these girls weirdly worship this man, and she is a psychiatrist, and she's kind of recognizing some like cultish behaviors and whatnot. So this is more so following her around as she is investigating into this around the campus and whatnot, but it's I don't know, doesn't do a good job of gripping you. And there were times where I was like really unsure who it was, and then other times I would be like, oh my god, this is so obvious. And I will say I didn't really see the plot twist coming because I feel like I have been led down so many different paths, but when it happened I was so extremely disappointed in what the plot twist was. And I think that is what everyone else's issue is as well, is that the plot twist in this I do not think is justifiable. It's kind of a dark and problematic twist at the end. What? Like, the whole time I'm like, what? No. I think that this was extremely underwhelming. The writing was okay. The mystery was kind of mad to me. There wasn't a whole lot going on. I just was expecting, I think, something a little more intense, a little more dark. And just the reveal at the end was just bad. I literally wish it would have went in any other direction. And I think I would have enjoyed it 10 times more. I think we were just going for too much of a shock factor. And it just didn't work. I only know of like one person who actually enjoyed this. I did give it a 3 stars. Because as I said, I didn't see the twist coming. It was just kind of meh. Like, I immediately forgot about it. Honestly. I'm going to talk about these next 2 as if they are just like one because it is a duology that I read, and the first one is We Hunt the Flame, and the second one is We Free the Stars, and I think this is now in competition to be like my most tabbed book. Anyway. I feel like if you have me on Twitter, you've probably seen that I've been talking a lot about this series lately, and that is because I just loved it so freaking much, and I need a spinoff. I feel like it was definitely set up to have a spinoff based off of these, but this is a fantasy world, and this girl who is kind of known as the Huntress, she can go into what is like this magical dark forest that makes everyone else like lose their minds or die. She can go in and come out like it's easy peasy. So she's kind of revered as like this mythical almost kind of being, and she's kind of known all over the country. We also follow a prince who is an assassin, and basically in order to bring magic back to the land, magic has disappeared and this dark forest has taken over. In order to get rid of this dark forest and to bring magic back, a witch shows up and tells the Huntress basically that she needs to go find this book to bring magic back. But our princely assassin has been sent to kill her on this voyage as well. So they're both kind of hunting the same thing, but for different reasons. And of course they come together. He needs her to find the book, and she kind of needs him to help her survive. But there's also a few other cast of characters. There is a really great found family aspect to this that I absolutely love. I love this cast of characters so very much. They are so charming, they are witty, there's so much banter, and they just act like just the best of friends, and I love it. I love it so much. But as you can tell, you know, things go differently than expected, and our assassin and our huntress, you know, might just end up liking each other. One thing leads to the next. But the angst in this between the two of them is like unmatched. Oh my god, the angst is something else. I love it. I had a really hard time putting these down, to be honest. These, but I also wanted to savor them at the same time because it's been so long since I've really loved a YA fantasy series like this. I thought the world was really great, and I will say that this is mostly based around the romance. The kind of plot does take a backseat to the romance, but there are a lot of tropes in this that I really enjoy in YA fantasy romance, one of which is the knife to the neck type thing. Oh god, I love it. This does have some cliche type things in the beginning, but once you get past those were a little frustrating at the beginning. Once you get past those, it's just a whirlwind of adventure from there. You get to see from different characters' points of views, and I just really enjoyed the world and the enemy and just seeing more of this world. There's a lot of traveling. I love when we're following a gang that is traveling and at some point they get split up. That's one of my favorites in YA fantasy. I will say when we get into the second book in the series, you can definitely tell that the plot is taking more of a back seat, and there are some things that I felt were the plot holy. Yeah, those are the words. There's a lot of holes in this plot that you can kind of see. They're sometimes glaringly obvious, and sometimes I would just be like, okay, alright, sure. And then I was like, maybe I'm just misreading it. Maybe that's the case. But it is still an exciting storyline. It's just that you could definitely tell there were times where it was like, things I feel like weren't totally thought out in some regards, or they just didn't make sense to me. That could always be the answer. Both of these were a 4.5 read for me. The main concern mostly being, I think at the beginning, this one was a little hard to get into. And then this one, I just felt like the plot was a little rushed and obviously was missing some aspects that it needed. But as you can tell, I still really enjoyed them, and they are probably one of my favorite characters, one of my favorite series. It's just so stinking good. I also listened to the Night Swim, and I will say that this is not like an enjoyable read, but it is an excellent read. I listened to the audiobook because it is fantastic. It has a podcast element to it, and so I was really excited about that. This follows a woman who does a podcast. It's like this true crime podcast where she tries to help solve murders or prove that people are innocent in some cases. And so she has taken on, for the first time ever, a real live case that is happening, and she is going in and kind of witnessing the trial and kind of reporting back on that and trying to be as unbiased as possible. The thing with this trial is that it takes place in a small town, and it is a girl who has accused this very, very popular, rich, and like going places guy of raping her. And so we are following this rape trial. However, there is also another point of view, and our main character, the podcaster, is receiving letters from a woman who lived in this town who swears that her sister was murdered and wants her to help her figure out who murdered her sister. So we're getting kind of two different points of views. We're looking back in the past when the other girl is a young girl with her sister alive and kind of witnessing the events that are leading up to her sister's death. And then we're also following our podcaster as she is following this trial, but she's also becoming increasingly interested in this young woman's murder that had happened like 20 years previously. This, as I said, is not like an enjoyable read, but it is a very good read. It is intense at times. Obviously, it talks very in depth about rape, and we're not just getting necessarily one rape case. There's more than that, and we do get into some of the details and some of the aftermath of how that affects these women, and kind of also talking about a lot of things that we see in pop culture and that we see online of people who are trying to say, you know, well, like, he's such a young, bright man, and how dare you, like, try to ruin his life by this, like, things like that. So at times it was also extremely frustrating because we see that in real life, and just seeing that play out in the story is frustrating because you just want to take the characters and just shake the hell out of them. The one thing I will say, I did give this 4 stars. My only real complaint is that I did not see why our podcast main character was becoming so increasingly invested in this other woman's story, because this woman was being creepy as fuck. She was like stalking this woman and leaving her notes, and I do not know why this woman was becoming more invested in this story, especially because at the beginning, like, the girl is not like leaving her anything like super conclusive or exciting. It's just like weird hints and basically like, I'm stalking you kind of thing. So I do not, that was the one thing I was like, this just does not make sense to me. This woman is smart. She follows true crime. Like, she would know that these are red flags to avoid. But maybe it's different when you're in that moment. I've never had anyone send me letters telling me to help them solve their sister's murder. So maybe it's different in the moment, but I just like could not see why she was like becoming so invested in this. It just didn't make sense to me. Especially because she was talking about like how much free time she didn't have, and then all of a sudden she had all this free time to research this other case. So I don't know, that just didn't make a whole lot of sense to me, but for the most part this was a really good listen, very impactful, and if you are in a good headspace to read such a thing, you know, I would say do it, because it was very good. And then the last thing that I am going to talk about, I have mentioned this a few times, I think in some videos, but definitely on Instagram, but this is a collection of short stories. Y'all know I love short story collections, so I'm always looking for new and unique ones to read, because I do tend to like darker fantasy, but also satirical kind of stories tend to be my favorite, and I found the perfect mix in Friday Black. This is small, but it is extremely powerful. This mostly is, again, it is satirical, and it is about being Black and what I would think is just in the world in general, but to me, I was looking at it a lot in America and kind of facing police brutality in some of these stories. There's some that are based in like actual mythology and bringing them into modern world and a new fresh take on that. There's some stories in here that just seem like a Black Mirror episode to me and were absolutely wild. I do have a rating of all the stories, and I will say there are, I think, 2 stories that I gave 2 stars, and it's honestly because I think that I'm just not smart enough to comprehend them. But for the most part, like, everything in here was fantastic. The very first story in this, like, hit me so hard. And it is about police brutality and kind of taking things into your own hands. And then another one, Zimmerland, and it's kind of about how a lot of white middle class people really want to hurt those who are different and those who are minorities, and how the government and capitalism kind of caters to that. So there was a lot of just really impactful stories in this. They were entertaining, they're dark and they're gritty, but also humorous at times, and there was some really good takes on just like consumerism. There was, you know, society. There was just so many different layers to these stories, and it's definitely one I will be revisiting in the future because I thought these stories were so damn good. I did give this a 4.5, which I kind of just based that around like whether or not I really enjoyed all the stories. And again, there was 2 that just I didn't quite understand, so, but the rest of them were really fantastic. That could be different for anyone who reads this because obviously, well, any story, you know, is in the eye of the beholder, but satirical stories too, I think, can be different based on, you know, how you perceive your environment and how you're perceiving the satire of the story and what they are trying to get at. So, I mean, there's different layers and whatnot, so you could get something totally different out of these stories. But I feel like I've been talking about it enough, and I did finally finish it. I was really savoring this and just reading 1 or 2 stories at a time and really taking the time to like think on them. So this is probably top 5 short story collection for me. So that is my July wrap up, the rest of my July wrap up. Let me know if you've read any of these, if you agree with any of these. If you don't, I'd love to just know your thoughts and feelings. What have you been reading this month? Just let me know, or leave an emoji, whatever you feel most comfortable doing. Hope you guys have liked this video. Don't forget to subscribe to see future videos from me. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next one. Bye.